This podcast is part of the Shareable Podcast Network. Learn more at shareable.fm. This is Rogue. I'm your host, Jeff Gibbard. Hello, my fellow superhumans. I am Jeff Gibbard, broadcasting to you live from Shareable FM headquarters right here in sunny Philadelphia. And I am pumped to bring you another episode of Rogue, the only podcast where I don't just interview superheroes, I steal from them. Every episode, I bring on a guest who has a real-world superpower, a mindset, a craft, a way of being. And then I get close enough to break apart their unique ability so it can be understood, rebuilt, and stolen. I don't just ask questions. I go line by line through their operating system until it's yours for the taking. Listen to ignite your superhuman spark and leave powerful enough to change the world. Now, let's get to know today's superpowered guest. So many people get stuck in their careers is that their communication just isn't landing. And what if I told you that if you don't get that figured out before you start using AI, that even the most sophisticated AI can't help you? Hello, my fellow superhumans. I am Jeff Gibbard, broadcasting you from Shareable FM headquarters right here in sunny Philadelphia. And I'm pumped to bring you another episode of Rogue, the only podcast where I don't just interview superheroes, I steal from them. Every episode, I bring on a guest who has a real-world superpower, a mindset, a craft, a way of being, and then I get close enough to break apart their unique ability so it can be understood, rebuilt, and stolen. I don't just ask questions. I go line by line through their operating system until it's yours to take. Listen to ignite your superhuman spark and leave powerful enough to change the world. Today, my guest is Lynne Williams. So let's get to know her. Lynne, welcome to the show. Thank you for being on Rogue.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Cool. So today we're going to talk about your superpower. You have many, so I'll remind you which one I'm interested in hearing about from you today. We talked a bit about having you on the show and the many superpowers you have, and one of which that caught my ear was that you help people to get clarity so that they can get traction. So looking at their LinkedIn profiles, looking at, their career history, their accolades, their education, all their different stuff, and that people have a hard time typically communicating that effectively. You help them with that. So let's talk about that superpower. Sound good?
Let's do it.
All right. So the first thing I would love to know about this superpower is why is this even a problem? Why is this a superpower that that you have and that's useful for people? Why does it matter that we help them get clarity with all this stuff? Is it even an issue? Do people really look at LinkedIn or resumes?
Well, there are 1.3 billion people on LinkedIn. So it's a must-have, not just a nice-to-have. And whether you are a job seeker, an entrepreneur, or an employed professional, you need to be on LinkedIn. And the superpower has to do with being able to be found for what you want to be when you grow up. So for me, it's about positioning as well as keywords. And yes, of course, there's that algorithm that steps in there, as well as AI. So you kind of got to mash it all together.
Got it. And if you see me looking over here during this, I'm writing down notes about how to steal your superpower. So
All right.
you help people to understand how to speak to both the technologies and systems that they'd be using on LinkedIn, but also to the people. So how do you make sure that the people reading it know that you're the right fit? And how do you make sure that the system is bringing the right people to you based on what they type? So you're matching the words for both search basically and for influence. Got it. Tell me a little bit.
LinkedIn is a database. Okay. So you have to play nice with the database if you are a job seeker when it comes to job titles on LinkedIn. So for example, you can't be project manager 3, but if you start typing project manager, there's a drop down menu that's going to give you a plethora of project manager type titles that you can choose from. So you know how government employees like from USAID or whatever got doged, they have these really long job titles. Well, they can't use those job titles on LinkedIn if they want to be found. So they have to speak civilianese, as in LinkedIn ease with the database, to pull down the job title. And then they can weave that long job title maybe in at the end of their first bullet point. So skills have to do with everybody, whether you are a job seeker, an entrepreneur, or a employed professional. And again, LinkedIn is a database. You can have up to 100 skills. So you want to make sure that you don't type things in because it will take it, but it won't be in the database because you don't have authority and control to add to the database. Only LinkedIn does. Now, if you look at my LinkedIn profile, going back to the titles, you're going to see I'm breaking the rules. I don't have the job titles from the database. Well, that's because I'm an entrepreneur. I could do whatever I want. But if I was a job seeker, I would play nice with the database, especially if it's a job that you want to be going to future forward.
So there's so many things I want to, so many threads I want to pull on there, but I don't want to go too deep in them. But I have a couple quick questions for you. So you mentioned using the job titles that if you're a job seeker, you want to use the right kind of job titles. And immediately my mind went to, well, what about all of the entrepreneurs in our audience that are listening and they're thinking, well, I'm not looking for a job, but I am looking for clients. Do the same rules apply there? And then I also just wanted to point out that I'm glad you brought it up for yourself. But in my skills, I have a lot of the skills that are the ones that come up that are in the database. But I also put in a few like vigilante crime fighter and unicorn whisperer, and a few of those because I look at those as the sort of thing that are sort of like little Easter eggs that when people come to my profile, they get to see some things that allude to some of my personality and some of the things that I'm interested in. Especially once I've kind of exhausted the list of database things of the 100, it's like, well, I've got 5 or 6 left, might as well do something that's on brand. So I wanted to ask you about kind of the two sides of it, which is entrepreneurs, how much of this applies to them? Is it the same degree? And then on the side of, weighing between using what is your brand and your personality versus what is searchable.
So your vigilante crime fighters, etc., is probably not going to be found, but it may give people a little chuckle. I would tend more towards using skills that are in the database. And in December, I started cleaning up my LinkedIn profile. I still haven't had a chance to clean up my skills. And here it is, May. Oh my goodness. Like, my, how time does fly, right? I've got so many irons in the fire, and it's on my to do list. So I would tend more towards sticking with the main keywords that are in the database. Now, I know I have some what I'm going to call quote unquote bad keywords in my skills section, but I didn't know what I didn't know a decade or so ago when I started all this, and I have over 100 recommendations. So I kind of use it as a teaching experience because I teach about 15 hours worth of LinkedIn content, believe it or not. Um, and, it's like, here's what you could do, but you shouldn't do. So I would put more the vigilante crime fighters more in the about section than I would in the skills section because people may tend to read that more than they will the skills section. The skills section is more about being found. But, I guess if you had that at the top, then, then people might see your sense of humor. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
I didn't
it's
put it in
just
my top 3. It's towards the bottom. I just ran out and I was like, I ran out of like actual ones that are, I feel like I could legitimately claim. And I just threw in some ones I thought were,
my
aligned brand
question is
wise.
how 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 do people have time to review everybody's all their details in their profile? I don't know.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that for me, the skills might be more like searchable database related. Like you have to think like Google when you're going in LinkedIn. What do you want to be known for? What do you want to be found for? It's not founder, CEO, president, owner. That's not what you're going to be found for. It's what problem do you solve? What pain point do you solve? It's, I'm a web developer, I'm a massage therapist, it's what do you do? What do you fix? It's that keyword, that key title, and not like some schmancy title, that nobody's going to search for in Google.
Yeah. So let's pour some salt in this wound a little bit to get a sense of like how big of an issue actually is this, because I think you kind of alluded to you were going to clean up your LinkedIn profile, and like you look up, it's May and you haven't, and it can feel that like, oh well, what's the big deal, right? But I think especially for entrepreneurs, we know that it only takes one or two new clients to really fundamentally change your situation. And so I'm curious, when you look at the impact of addressing this, of learning the superpower of how to communicate more effectively, what's at stake here, and what are some misconceptions that people might have about the process they have to go through in order to get to this better? I mean, is it a giant gap? Do you have to hire people for thousands of hours to be able to get, into more of those search queries? What exactly is at stake here, and what are some of the things that people might be missing about this?
Well, let me just describe the way I work and why I like to do what I do.
Mhm.
I'm a former K-12 teacher, and I used to teach special ed, I used to teach gifted and talented, and I taught everything in between. So when I taught special ed and gifted and talented, I wrote IEPs, individual education plans, and GIEPs, gifted individual education plans. And I wrote reavals. So what that means to me is when I work with people on resumes and LinkedIn profiles, that is their adult GIEP, gifted individual education plan. So I work differently than many other people where they will do a done for you. I don't do that. I do a done with you. So I choose quality, um, uh, working together to get people from point A to point B, but they have to learn how to drive the stick shift of their resume, of their LinkedIn profile. And the only way to do that is if they do hands on learning and touching and feeling. So they have to know where all the buttons are to push. So I start with a Google Doc and a Google Sheet. So the Google Doc is where I have a resume template, whether we use it or not, because it's still, LinkedIn still has various sections that are, the information can be transferred over. And then the Google Sheet is all about the keywords. So I'm a little bit of a WordPress geek, and I started with Yoast, and now I'm a ranked math pro girl, and so it's all about SEO for blog articles and whatnot. I also wrote a chapter in a book back in 2016. It's called Find Your Fit, a practical guide to landing the job you love. Well, the person that wrote the foreword of the book is the very famous Richard Bowles, or Dick Bowles, who wrote What Color's Your Parachute? That's a very famous career book that was written for almost 50 years. So that chapter was happened to be about applicant tracking system. So I got off on a tangent all about keywords. And then when I've been, playing on LinkedIn for over a decade, that's like a whole nother world, but it still relates to keywords and SEO and database. And now we have AI into the mix. So the idea is to be able to guide somebody and work transparently in a Google Doc. I do the setup, I'll do the formatting if it's a resume, and I don't go into people's LinkedIn profiles. They have to do their own, but let's work on the content together and build it. And okay, now we've got to put some prompts in for AI, and without AI, with the algorithm, the Llama, the Brew 360, and the natural language, that's going in. So it's kind of a mashup of using a whole bunch of tools and ideas and collaborating together, because when you're building something on your LinkedIn profile, let's say you're an entrepreneur, it has to resonate with you. You have to love it. And if you see it being built live, and you're working with somebody together, then it's like, hey, no, I like this. I don't like this. I want to do this. This is what's important to me. So you have input, you have say in the matter, but we build it together. And that's kind of how I work.
I like that. I like that. So this you we began to get into the part where I can start picking apart your process, your superpower. So here's what I want to do. I want to shift into actually starting to break down how you do what you do. I want to start to steal your superpower. So one of the most interesting things that I've noticed, and kind of the premise of this show, stealing people's super abilities, is that oftentimes the things that we do really well, we take for granted, and sometimes that makes it very hard to explain. So it's the sort of thing where we do it well, so we think anybody can do it. And time again, I've seen that that's not actually the case. So what I do throughout this is I try to encourage us to assume that people have no idea what we're talking about. And let's start really from the very basics, and let's rebuild your skill from scratch so that we can help people learn how to do it. So I'm going to steal your superpower by trying to break it down into simple step by step format. So let's start here. I want to start by making this personal. Superpowers tend to develop in a lot of different ways. And it usually starts with us. We have something that happened, and we know that this power emerged from us to try and overcome sort of a problem. So tell us your story real quick. Where did this interest in this subject even become something for you? I mean, I know professionally this is what you do, but I'm curious, like,
Mhm.
what's the origin story, the moment where you realized, one, that you're good at this, but two, that this is a thing that the world needs?
So you've probably heard of the book by Malcolm Gladwell called The Tipping Point.
Hmm.
And it takes 10,000 hours to become a subject matter expert in something. So it's kind of like if you want to be in the first violin chair, if you want to be in the NFL, it takes practice. So I've put that over 10,000 hours into practice, and it all stemmed from being a job seeker. So I was looking for a job, and I did not get any interview request in 7.5 months. And I'm like, holy moly, there is something wrong here. I'm doing something wrong. I didn't know what I didn't know. So I learned by doing research on the applicant tracking system and the keywords and formatting resumes and whatnot, and I just kind of wound up perfecting my craft and tweaking and changing things. So I know this is a little bit crazy, but here I've been doing this over 10 years and I don't have a website. All my work comes in from happy clients, word of mouth referrals, and from speaking and writing. I speak nationally, internationally, mostly on Zoom. And I do locally, I do speak, in person in the greater Philadelphia area. But I do a lot of writing. So I have, a LinkedIn newsletter, I have a Substack newsletter, and I write for 5 online Philadelphia area platforms and he has like over 120,000 subscribers. So I'm writing like 3 articles a week and sharing a lot of step by step how to articles so that people know how to do things. So I became a member of something called the Philadelphia Area Great Careers Group. It was a meetup group that was started in April 2010. I had absolutely no idea that the owners of the meetup group were going to ask me if I wanted to take over the group in 2015. And I accepted. They said it takes time, it takes money. I'm like, I'm down. So um, I did it minimally in 2015 and 2016. My mom passed away in 2016, and so I had hopes of turning it into a 501c3 nonprofit, and I was not able to do that until I got through the estate stuff in 2017. So I put together a board, and with that board, we decided, okay, we're going to build a website. Well, we now are on our 4th website, believe it or not, since 2019. And we've learned a lot along the way. We've learned a lot about nonprofit and how it works. I came with absolutely no nonprofit experience other than being a volunteer. So, you've probably heard as a nonprofit leader, you are a servant leader. You're here to help community. So We do career education, about 18 to 25 events a month that would appeal to job seekers, client seekers, aka entrepreneurs, business owners, as well as people who are employed and they want to help build their brand. So, it was an evolution for me of being a job seeker to taking over a meetup group and then turning it into a nonprofit. And then I left my full-time job in 2017, and jumped off that proverbial entrepreneurial cliff and,
Nice.
spread my wings. But I did have some entrepreneurial experience from the past when I was very pregnant with baby number one, who's now almost 37. And my husband had come home one day and he says, I quit my job. I'm like, you what? He says, I quit my job. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, we got a mortgage, we got 2 car payments, we got a boat payment, and we have a baby coming. He says, I'm going to get my general contractor's license. So he went out and he actually did get his general contractor's license. And we started a general contracting and construction management business. We wound up doing 5 to 7 million a year. We had 24 employees and we grew. So, and I had OTJ, on the job experience, learning what liens were and how to apply for credit and all this other stuff. So that was sort of my entree into the entrepreneurial world. So I've gone from that to being just a solopreneur, but I'm very happy being a solopreneur. I don't really want to scale my business. My happiness and satisfaction comes from working with people one on one to get them from point A, transform them to get to point B, whatever their point B is.
I love that. So you have this evolution of learning this skill of, and it's coming at the same time where you have the on the job training of figuring out how to be an entrepreneur, run a 501c3, all of these different things. And I have this, I often say that there are kind of like 3 types of individuals with superpowers, right? There's the Superman archetype, which is like you're born on Krypton and just you're near the yellow sun and you've just always had super strength, right? So there's an element of this for you that you were just born with. And I want to dig into that in a moment. The second is something happens to you and your life just is never the same and you just kind of go down. And that's kind of what we just covered here, is that like something
Yeah.
happened for you, you kind of kept following the path of what it is, and eventually it developed into this ability. And then the third one, which kind of intersects and overlaps with the second one, is the Batman style, which is you train to become the world's greatest detective, right? And so much of what you've done with your tinkering and your trying and figuring things out has been that style of superpower. So I'm curious if you can, uh just using yourself as the example and putting yourself in the audience's shoes. They're listening to you talk about how you're doing this and the experiences you've had. It's unlikely they're going to go through the same experiences of trying something out like this and spending, a decade doing it. So what do they need in order to be able to embody this superpower and utilize it for themselves? What parts of it are just innate to you that it comes easy to you because it's just who you are? What parts of it you kind of mentioned are the parts that you kind of something happened to you and you figured it out. But what are the parts that you've been training? What are the things that if you're somebody who wants to steal this superpower, what do they need to innately be born with to give them some sort of an advantage? And then what are the skills that they would have to tinker with and learn? Just as like a short list of some of these things.
Oh, that's a really jam-packed question you
It
got
is.
there,
There's a
Jeff.
lot.
There's
Yeah.
there's a lot to
Take it
unpack.
piece by piece.
Um, um, I didn't know what I didn't know back in the day about job search because I was looking for a job. I was looking for a full-time W-2 job, and I didn't know about keywords. I didn't know about applicant tracking systems. I didn't know about styles of resumes, and then all that led to LinkedIn. So I started going to workshops, listening to speakers, and pulling out tips. But I can tell you that what people need is, if they want to fast track the process, they should hire an expert.
Mhm.
So they should hire a coach. Um, My process is generally about 6 hours of my time, and because I'm collaborative, I have people do homework. I teach a lesson on Zoom, you got homework. I teach a lesson on Zoom, you do homework. That keeps the cost down, but will fast track the process.
Hmm.
So I've had people, maybe start before a weekend, and by early next week, if they're like committed time wise, they just, you know, back and forth. It's like a tennis game between Zoom and homework, Zoom and homework, Zoom and
Hmm.
homework, if I'm available, right? And I've had other people who they're working, um, they have family, and it's like, okay, I can meet once a week, and then it just takes longer. But, you can do all this yourself, but you have to give yourself time. And if time is money, do you want to fast track, or do you want to just learn to do it yourself by going to workshops over time? There's a lot of long-term unemployed right now. It's a pretty wacky job market, but there are still jobs that are available. Now, I look in marketing people. I've had a lot of marketing clients. These people know how to do marketing for businesses, but career documents are a whole nother animal. So it's a different style of writing, it's a different style of marketing yourself.
Hmm.
So sometimes, you need your handheld, so to speak, through the process. And I can work with anybody. I have clients who are MDs, DOs, PhDs, ESQs, JDs, all the way down to Lynn, can you take care of my kid? The kid needs an internship in college. The kid just graduated from college, can't find a job. So I have everybody. I don't specialize in a specific anything. It's all about keywords. I specialize in individual needs, right? So it's how can I help you transform from where you are to where you want to go, point A to point B. It's just like getting in a car. You have to have a map, right? And
Hmm.
if you have a map and you have directions, you're going to get there faster than if you just try to drive in the car and figure out where you're going, right?
Yeah. So,
So that's what I do.
so if you were to start over today, looking at yourself, looking at the career path you've been through and reaching the point where you were looking for a job and struggling, and you're thinking about the superpower that you now possess of being able to understand how to utilize the skills you have to bring clarity to someone seeking for a job, to find the right people, to be found in the right ways, all of that. If you were starting over, you would say number one thing is you would probably find a coach or a mentor or somebody who has the
Yes.
knowledge already to fast track it. So got that
Yes.
on the tip of learning, that makes perfect sense that you're essentially giving yourself expert guidance along the way. And the way you explained early on about how for people to think about it is that you're doing a bit of a blend of keyword optimization and search and also brand and positioning. So you've got to blend those
Mhm.
two things. I want to shift to the way you think about things and your communication skills as kind of like the
Mhm.
next two legs of this table, if you will. I find that there are kind of a couple different components of thinking that are at play here. And I'm curious which of these you find is most at play for you. But there's the thinking about the mindset, which I think when you're dealing with career, job hunting and careers, that it can be really exhausting to get so few responses or to get rejections or to get interviews and interviews that wind up going nowhere, that there's a certain mindset of resilience, I'd imagine, that has to be a
Yeah.
part of this. And in the process, there's also, I'd imagine, different ways of thinking, creative thinking, strategic thinking, critical thinking. And I'm curious, what are the different ways in which you bring, I want you to kind of like step outside yourself and look at your way of thinking when you're working with a client so that somebody listening can take that same perspective, that same frame that you're looking through and can
Mhm.
start approaching their own job seeking through the same lens. What do they need to be thinking about, or how do they need to be thinking so that they can move through this more effectively?
Great question. So, first of all, you have to have positivity. Nobody wants to hang out with a curmudgeon. So, you have to be out there networking. Make networking a habit. I don't care that you're an introvert. I don't care that you have some social issues. You must find a wingman or a wingwoman to be there for you, to go out to networking events. It's really, really important, because people hire people, not bots. Um, but if you're out there networking, meeting people either online or in person, you want to connect on LinkedIn. And what are they going to see on LinkedIn? If you don't have your LinkedIn profile optimized with a banner, which is your billboard, a nice, profile picture, and a keyword optimized profile that explains your story, not in paragraphs, but in a way that is skimmable and scannable, so that, people can glance at it and kind of get a handle on you easily and who you are and what you do, or that you can be found by LinkedIn Recruiter, LinkedIn Recruiter Lite, from the people that have those platforms, or from a Boolean search. You know, can people find who you are and what you do based upon those keywords? So you can still put your personality, and whatnot in your about section, but you also have to think database. So it's a meshing and a melding of database, personality, authenticity, personal branding, algorithm, AI. Like, you got to kind of put it all together. And again, as I said, if you fast track, I was a single parent, and I did not have money to hire a career coach. I wish I had, though. I had just kind of, um I've had some things going on in my life. I went through a very bad divorce, and I also lost everything in my life to fire. And that hit me up financially big time. And so, being a single parent with two kids about college age, it was like, oh, woe is me. But I wish I had swiped that credit card to pay for somebody, because I was in job search 11 and a half months because I didn't know what I didn't know. So lots of people come to, greatcareers.org for our um, workshops and whatnot. And we make, because we are a volunteer nonprofit, it's a whopping $8 a month. Like, give up your, Starbs frap venti, to come and learn and get over 20 hours worth of programming. Unless you pay monthly, then it's more, but that's if you pay annually. And I just wish I would have known then what I know now, because that would have probably fast tracked my job search. But I did land a job because of networking.
Regarding communication, because so much of what you do is, if we zoom out, you're talking largely about communication. You're talking about, how do I
Yes.
communicate with people, and how do I communicate with search engines, and how do I
Yes.
communicate with people in person versus how do I communicate with them when they visit my profile. So there's so much here that is about effective communication. And
Yes.
one of the things that I've heard you mention a few times here is really about putting, I would say, putting things in the right places. So you mentioned using the right keywords in your skills versus putting your personality and brand maybe in your about section. And
Mhm.
I think one of the principles I'm hearing from you right there is know the right place for the right type of communication on LinkedIn. Is that an
Yes.
accurate way of kind of looking at
Yes.
your position, maybe?
Yes. So, in your headline, you ask 10 resume writers, 10 LinkedIn coaches how to do something, you're going to get 20 different answers, right?
Hmm.
So, I'm going to tell you how I do things. I think that your title, or, the big problem you solve, should come first, followed by keyword, 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 whatever fits, and a USP, unique selling proposition. You can call it a personal branding statement, a value proposition statement. I like calling it a unique selling proposition, USP, because I think everyone is unique. You can copy and paste that USP into your billboard, your banner. So if you think about if you're driving down a freeway 60, 70 miles an hour, turnpike maybe, um, and you go by a banner, you have to be able to read it quickly. You don't want a white banner, so you got to change that grayish, blob default banner into something that's going to help you build your brand. So, but it's your professional brand. It's not a waterfall, it's not a beach, it's not a mountain you go ski at. It's your professional brand. Who are you? What do you do? And then down in the about section, it has to be readable, skimmable, and scannable. So I'm all about emojis. I'm a boomer, and I make sure that all my boomer friends and everybody else that there's emojis in the about section, because when you go to look at that on a mobile device, it has to be friendly to the human eye. It has to be skimmable and scannable and bullet points and sections. If somebody's got paragraphs in their about section, my eyes are going to glaze over. I am not going to read it. It's just one of those things. I just, that's it. Um, so when you get to the experience section, and this goes for entrepreneurs as well as employed people, bullet point, white space, bullet point, white space. It's all there for the bots to read, but it's there for the humans to read, which makes it skimmable and scannable. And there better be a metric in every single bullet point. How did you help a company make money, save time, improve processes? If you're an entrepreneur, how many millions or whatever did you help a client make? Or how did you help them with an open rate on their emails, or whatever the metric is of showcasing how you can help somebody get from point A to point B.
I want to close out in trying to break down your power by understanding immediate next actions and just actions as a way of thinking in this to begin with, which is, one of the actions that I heard you take is experimentation, is trying new things and seeing what works. And another part of it is just even taking the first steps to begin with, recognizing how important it is to do that work, to do that research, to get a coach, to do the research yourself, but to understand how to position yourself for both people and search. So I want to close out by understanding, in your way of doing this, how do you think about the process of taking action, in the sense of, how do you know when it is the right time to make an update? How do you know where to do that? How do you know when it's time that you need external help versus something that you can immediately do yourself to make things a little better? What are some of those things, so we can get a sense of making moves?
I I offer people a 15-minute complimentary call, and I can review resume, LinkedIn, but I'm going to give you rapid fire saying, what you can fix, and you decide whether or not you want to have individualized services for a fee, or if you'd like to jump in and attend workshops for a much smaller fee if you're on a really, really, really tight budget. Sometimes there's a lot of things out there that I do, a lot of trainings, and they happen to be free because I'm speaking for affiliates. So there's free, there's low cost, or there's individualized attention and hand holding. So you have to decide what your budget is, and you have to know with me what you want to be when you grow up. You have to know where you want to go. I can't help you if you are confused and you don't know who you are, because the positioning and the keywords relate to where we're going to transform you to go. So, for example, I had a physician, internal medicine physician. She wanted to be a medical director. She was found within 2 weeks of completing her LinkedIn profile. She was found. She never applied to the job. So, and she wasn't a medical director before. She was a physician. And so that's the idea, is about optimizing your LinkedIn profile using different strategies for keywords, on the resume, as well as different strategies in the LinkedIn profile, keeping in mind that it's a database. But in the about section, you can use other versions or synonyms of the words. Now, when I do the data-driven decision making with the keywords in the spreadsheet, that's something a superpower I don't share unless I have paid clients. Okay, so that's my secret sauce, and girls got to eat, right? So got to cut the line there somewhere. But that is where you have to pull keywords from different sources. ChatGPT is not going to give you the only list of keywords that there are to make you understand, what is the right synonym. So we'll leave it at that. There has to be some mystery, right? Mystery's a spice of life. Oh, you're muted.
Exactly. Sorry, I was muted because I was typing down some of my thoughts about your superpower and how it works. So I want to recap it for you now, the things that I heard in this conversation. So for listeners out there, I'm about to give you the recipe that I heard from Lynne so that you can steal her superpower, which is to bring clarity to your LinkedIn profile. And really, I think in general, to your communication as a job seeker or an entrepreneur, that you're hitting both the communication to the people, but also to the search engines that are running on top of these databases. So here's some of the things that I heard. The first thing that I heard is that one of the key steps that you would do if you were doing it all over again is you would definitely seek out a coach or a mentor. And what I heard from you is that part of that is just that you spent so much time learning how all of these things work. And there's so much that's involved with balancing between writing for search engines and writing for people that it could really
Yes,
facilitate and fast track that. And especially for job seekers, given that this is the sort of thing where time may be of the essence, that would be one of your first tips. If people were to go about doing this themselves, or if even if they were to work with a coach, I also heard you say that, and this was, you dropped this in right at the end, but I thought this was an absolute jewel that deserves its moment in the sun, which is you have to know where you want to go. And I think that level of thinking and considering where it is that you want to go with your career and who you want to be when you grow up is such an essential part of doing any of this work. You really can't optimize your profile or tell people what you do if you don't know what it
exactly.
is that you want to do. So I think that is a really important starting point, whether you're working for by yourself or with someone in the process of communicating, of getting clarity on your profile. There's the two sides. There's the doc side and the spreadsheet side, which I think serve as sort of a two ways of thinking about it. On the spreadsheet side, you're really thinking about words. What are the words somebody might be searching for? And I'm adding this piece in that I heard from someone once, that if there's someone out there that you want to emulate, or they're a competitor and they're ranking really well for the things that you want to rank well for, look at their page and break it down and start to look at what are some of the words they're using. What's the density of the words? How are they fitting those words in throughout their whole profile? But that's the side about words, about density, about how those things are all working on your page. On the side of how do you influence and connect with people, that's a bit more of an art than it is a science. And that's, again, when you know who you want to be and where you want to go, that's about writing for people in a way that is persuasive, easily readable, easily skimmable, easily understandable. So in communication, it's about one, understanding that you are simultaneously writing for both people and for bots. And it's
Yes,
also knowing where each of those things are, back to the point of getting a coach or someone who knows, is letting you know that this is not the place to put the creativity. This is the place to put the keywords. And over here, this is not as much the place for keywords. It's really more the place that people are reading. So go with creativity. So I think that's a really important distinction about when you're communicating for both, is not just that you're doing it, but also knowing where you're doing it. And then the final piece that I heard from you is that if you're looking for an immediate action, one of the first things you can do is go out there and be more visible and be positive as you're doing it. Find yourself a wing person if you need it, but that connecting with people is going to be one of your fastest tracks. And then when they come back to your site, hopefully they're going to see all of the things that they need to see to match their experience of meeting you in person with what they're seeing on your page. So going through learning, thinking, communication, and action, we've got the entire superhuman framework here that hopefully allows us to steal some of your ability. And if they need more of it, obviously they can come and find you. What did I leave out before I ask people where they can find you?
okay, so one other thing that I want to add is for job seekers. There's something called an applicant tracking system, ATS. There's hundreds of them. And this is where you submit your resume online, where it'll say upload or autofill. And that's different than attach. So I break down two resumes, a pretty resume for humans with a pop of color, and then a deconstructed resume for bots that can be read by applicant tracking systems. So it's all about the formatting of the resume. Can your resume be read? So applicant tracking systems give scores based upon contextualization, context, content, right? So words. So you also have to learn how to play the game and game the game, and not only weave in keywords, but weave in key phrases. So that's a whole nother aspect of, my process that I deal with for job seekers. So, where can people get a hold of me? Obviously, LinkedIn. That's my jam. So it's linkedin.com/in/Lynne, Lynne Williams, E for education. And also, right underneath my LinkedIn profile, you will see more gobsmacking resources. So that is my link tree. That's my link of links. You'll get to the nonprofit there, my upcoming speaking events, my publications of where I write, etc., and other places where I volunteer. But mainly the greatcareers.org website is the nonprofit corporation, because I've got a website, but I haven't written the content. Like the shell's been built, but I haven't put any meat on the bone, so to speak. I'll get there. Again, see those three little guys in the background there? Those are my three grandsons, and I've been spending a little bit of time with them. So they're pretty important to me. So I'll get to me when I get to me.
Beautiful. Well, I would say no one can hold it against you to spend time with your grandkids rather than putting up a website. So I will make sure that everything that you just said is added to the show notes. And for all of our superpowered listeners, I hope you're not done growing, and we'll come back for the next episode of Rogue, where I'll be talking to another superhero to learn about and steal their superpowers. As a reminder, if you join the Superhero Institute, we have something called the Rogue Gallery, where every one of these superpowers with my guests is broken down into a PDF that you can download so you can steal it for yourself. This has been an episode with Lynne Williams, and I have been Jeff Gibbard as always. And until the next one, please keep doing your part to create a world that is kinder, safer, and more equitable.